Pleased to report that as of this week, the health department has allocated COVID-19 vaccines to all qualified community providers who have requested an order. So speak to your doctor about getting your child vaccinated or yourself. The vaccine allows us all to live our lives, to head to the beach, to go to summer camps, or hang out with friends while staying safe. So as a parent and as the city's doctor, I urge you to make an appointment. The vaccine will protect your child, your family, and your community. And Mr. Mayor, it might help the Zoomers spend a little bit less time on Zoom.
Wow. Dave, you surprised me there, combining the two Zoom concepts into one. I didn't see that coming. Yes, we would definitely like the Zoomers to spend more time away from any kind of screen, and you can do that when you're vaccinated. So parents, I'm going to speak as a parent, and I experienced the joys of having Zoomers in my life. And so well, I guess one Zoomer out of two, but look, the bottom line, parents, this is how you keep your kids safe, you keep your whole family safe. And it's such an important thing to do. It is working. Look at what we're showing you every day about how this city is coming back. But it's not just about the city as a whole, it's about your own life. Vaccination protects you, protects your family. Think about the elders in your life, the ability for everyone to see each other and everyone knowing everyone's safe and how it helps us all get back to normal. So, parents, your younger kids now are going to be ages 12 to 15. Your younger kids are going to be able to be vaccinated. Let's get going. Let's get them vaccinated for the good of everyone. And thank you, Dr. Choksi, for you and all your colleagues making it an easy experience for our children, for our families. Now, I want to ask an important question of everyone. What week is it? Well, there's only one appropriate answer. It's Streets Week. Streets Week. Although I'm looking at the graphic and my specific suggestion there should be an additional exclamation point each day has not been followed. I'm very let down. There'll be disciplinary action meted out against the team. It's Wednesday, so it should be Streets Week, exclamation point, exclamation point, exclamation point. On Monday, we talked about safety and enforcement. On Monday, we talked about doubling down on Vision Zero so people get around the city safely. On Tuesday, yesterday, we talked about busways. We talked about more bus lanes, bike boulevards. We talked about things that are going to greatly expand mass transit options and biking options and continue to make this a better city for everyone. Today, we're talking about reimagining our streets further. And this is something we need to keep doing because what we learned in COVID was there are a lot of things we could do differently and successfully, and obviously open streets was such a crucial example of the kind of change we need. So first of all, tomorrow I'll be signing legislation to make open streets permanent. This is really exciting because it's been a great experience for so many communities. It's reimagining how we use our streets. We're finding new possibilities all the time. More communities are coming forward with ideas. We need this to be a permanent thing. That's step one, but now step two, let's go even further with open boulevards. Open boulevards takes the concept of open streets and supercharges it. Multiple blocks in a row filled with restaurants, with performances, with community activities. Great for the neighborhood, great for tourists too. This is the kind of thing that people are going to love because all the life and vitality of New York City, all the diversity, all the energy will be on display in these open boulevards. So this is going to be the summer of New York City, and the open boulevards are going to be a great example of the reason people will flock here to experience what we have in a way no place else on earth has. Now, we'll be opening 10 open boulevards to begin on a rolling basis in the next few weeks. There you see on your screen the locations around the 5 boroughs. And it's going to come with a lot of things to identify it as a special place, special branding. You'll be clear when you're walking into the open boulevards, you're coming into something special. There'll be places for people to hang out, picnic tables, chairs, things that will make it a real space to just enjoy and gather with others in a safe, positive way. Department of Transportation leading the way, thank you, partnering well with so many other partners, including NYC and company. We want to thank them for the great work that they do all the time to encourage tourism, and it's starting. You can see it in a great way. This is a crucial piece of a recovery for all of us. Doubling down on what's great about New York City, doubling down on the things that make us special, giving us hope and heart and energy as we recover, but also bringing so many visitors in. And everyone will benefit. Neighborhoods will benefit for sure. Restaurants will benefit. It's the people who work in restaurants who we care about deeply, the folks who started restaurants, built them through no matter what was thrown at them, kept building their restaurants. We want all of them to be strong in the year 2021. So Open Boulevard is going to help us do that. And I want you to hear from someone who has been really outstanding as an advocate for all the restaurants of New York City. He has helped us think through new and innovative approaches to bring communities and restaurant and nightlife communities together to resolve issues and move forward together as chair of the city's Office of Nightlife Advisory Board. Strong voice for small businesses and for the people who, with their restaurants, make this city magical. My pleasure to introduce the Executive Director of the New York City Hospitality Alliance, Andrew Ridgie.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I mean, this is amazing. I can't believe it's been about 1 year since we were together to announce the Open Restaurants Program. And here we are. I think the Open Restaurants Program really just helped inspire communities and policymakers about how do we reimagine our public space to create a more livable, more vibrant city. And we all know it's been an extraordinarily trying year. But seeing folks come out into the street for the restaurants, setting up so people can dine out, see the open culture, the arts, and now the announcement of Open Boulevards is really just this evolution of what we've learned over the past year, how we can create a more livable city by reimagining our streets, our public space, and really finding complementary uses. And we also know when we launched the Open Restaurants Program, it helped save, thousands and thousands of our small, beloved businesses. It was responsible, I think, for bringing back about 100,000 jobs in this vital industry. And it's just so exciting to see this evolution. And I have no doubt when we expand this program through the Open Boulevards program and weave it with beautification and art installations and cultural initiatives and really get communities involved, we build back a more resilient, a more livable city that really supports everyone in so many different ways. So I really want to commend you for your leadership on these issues, all the advocates, the Department of Transportation. It's great to hear NYC and Co. is involved to help bring visitors back to New York City to see and remind them of everything that we have here and why there really is no place else in the entire world like New York City. I've been saying from the beginning, New York City needs our restaurant industry, our nightlife to recover in order for New York City to recover. And these are the types of programs that are innovative, that help really aid in that recovery. And through all the doom and gloom over the past year, I will just say there are some bright spots. And there's this old Winston Churchill quote I always love to reference, which is, do not let a good crisis go to waste. And I think open restaurants, open streets, now open boulevards, and all these other programs are a perfect example of using that saying and that wisdom. Let's take a bad situation and let's really rebuild something that's so much better. So, Mr. Mayor, I want to thank you and your team and everyone else who's been strong advocates. Let's get our city back. Let's get our restaurants back. Let's open up our boulevards and bring everyone in and bring them all back. So thank you again.
Thank you so much, Andrew. Andrew, appreciate your energy. You have been throughout this whole crisis just fighting with great energy. I like your reference to Winston Churchill. You've been someone who kept fighting no matter what. But let me tell you, I thought about you the other day because I walked down the street and I went by restaurant after restaurant, filled the outdoors, seating filled up, people happy, people back in their jobs. New Yorkers are loving open streets and open restaurants, and it's something we have found that's going to be a great part of our future. So you see the good news and you see the rebirth, and thank you for being one of the people who helped make it happen.
Thank you.
Now, someone else who helped make it happen, and he started out this crisis in the city council, and he believed deeply that we could do new and better things with open streets and open restaurants. And now he has ascended to a higher post, and he will always make sure that we get the most opportunity for the borough of Queens. And I bet he's going to tell us that there are amazing restaurants in the borough of Queens, and he would be right about that. And so I welcome for this good announcement the Borough President of Queens, Donovan Richards.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and it is great to be on. Great to see you. It was great to see you cycling yesterday too out there. So don't give up. Keep going. Before I begin, I have to wish my wife a happy birthday. I want to thank the love of my life for taking a chance on me, Tamika Richards. So happy birthday, baby. All right. So why am I here to talk about open streets? And I know Gersh from Streets Blog will surely mention in a little bit about the op-ed I wrote yesterday on the importance of ensuring that we see more open streets right here in Queens, and 34th Avenue and Jackson Heights is such an example of what we should be looking to do as we reimagine our streets across the city. You know, every time I visit there, I'm beyond excited. You see people doing Tai Chi. I even was hopscotching a few weekends ago. An ESL program is going on the boulevard. So it is no secret that there are communities like Jackson Heights, Forest Hills, Jamaica, parts of the Rockaways that do not enjoy enough open space and green space. And a lot of these communities are representative of communities of color that were hit hardest during this pandemic. So we need to make sure that we are building back not just normal, but with a new normal that will ensure these communities have access to more open space. And this is why I've repeatedly supported and advocated for the Linear Park to happen on 34th Avenue as well, Mr. Mayor. I like Park Avenue, but I'm a Queens guy, and we need to see it on 34th Avenue as well. So I'm very excited about this announcement on open boulevards. They're exactly what we need to see in urban communities. They're what urban communities are clamoring for. We need to create new parks in new traditional forms. You know, we know that it's not realistic to just create new parks everywhere. But if we are really reimagining what our streets can look like, not just for motorists, but for pedestrians as well, I think we can create a new normal here across the city. I'll end in saying that I am very excited about what we will see happening on Ditmars Boulevard and Woodside Avenue. Mr. Mayor, you know, I always like to push the button on more. So I look forward to hearing more announcements eventually for Southeast Queens, for Forest Hills and other neighborhoods as well. And I want to end by thanking you for your partnership on getting the Queensboro Bridge done. Yesterday, we announced about $3 million out of my capital budget to ensure that both pedestrians and cyclists could travel across that bridge in a safe manner. And it would not be possible without your partnership. So we look forward to that continued partnership. So thank you. I want to thank Jim Burke, Nula, Don Siff, the 34th Avenue Coalition. Queens is leading the way into the future as we reimagine our streets. And Mr. Mayor, my only ask for you on the gift cards is, are they retroactive for folks who got their shots earlier? So just wanted to hear a little bit about that. And I guess that may be a press question that Katie Honan asked. So thank you for having me.
Nice try there, Borough President. I want to say, I like the way you promote multiple causes during your remarks, but the most important thing I could say to you, as I'm coming up on yet another wedding anniversary, is you better take Tamika to a really, really nice open restaurant for her birthday.
Absolutely.
You have a plan? Are you ready?
Oh, I booked that a week ago, Mr. Mayor. I'm ahead of you.
Okay, a week ago. A week ago. That is extraordinary foresight. I'm impressed. Okay. Say happy birthday to Tamika for me and have a great time.
Thank you. Good to see you.
Take care. Okay, now, We believe in activating our public spaces and making them part of our recovery. We also believe fundamentally in equity and addressing the disparities in this city. And so in the State of the City, I talked about how we need to create new spaces in the communities most affected by COVID. The 33 communities identified by our task force on racial inclusion and equity as the places we need to double down, invest in, help bring back strongly from this crisis. So we already have projects underway in 20 of the 33 neighborhoods to activate new open spaces for the community. That can mean new public plazas. It can mean expanded pedestrian space. It can mean public markets or new community programming, artistic events, performances. We're going to continue to roll out new examples of each and every kind of this approach for the next weeks ahead. We're going to reach all 33 neighborhoods. The crucial point is to ensure that neighborhoods hit hardest by COVID benefit from the changes we're making, that they really get their fair share that they deserve, and bringing these wonderful activities to the streets is a part of that. So we're looking forward to that in the weeks ahead. All right, I told you earlier, our indicators look good. I could give positive indicator reports all day long. So it's been a very nice stretch these last weeks. Let's keep it going. Here we go. Number one, daily number of people admitted to New York City hospitals for suspected COVID-19. Today's report, 90 patients. So we continue to have great results, confirmed positivity, 25.56%, hospitalization rate down to 1.25 per 100,000. Number two, new reported cases on a 7-day average. Today's report, 743 cases. Look at that, just continued downward slope. We got more work to do, but that looks really wonderful. And number three, percentage of people testing citywide positive for COVID-19. Today's report on a 7-day rolling average, 1.90%. Also, constant downward slope. Let's keep that going. Okay, few words in Spanish, going back to the topic of the open boulevards. Las calles abiertas han transformado nuestra ciudad y han ayudado a las empresas pequeñas. Hoy vamos más adelante. Los bulevares abiertos van a llenar nuestras calles con música, cultura y belleza. Nuestra ciudad es fuerte. Nuestra ciudad está recuperando. Este verano, esta ciudad va a regresar mejor que nunca. With that, let's turn to our colleagues in the media. And please let me know the name and outlet of each journalist.
We'll now begin our Q&A. As a reminder, we're joined this morning by Dr. Choksi, by Dr. Mitchell Katz, and by Department of Transportation Chief Strategy Officer Jimmy Kim. First question today goes to James Ford from Pix 11.
Well, right off the top, good morning.
You're a good leadoff hitter, James.
Thanks so much, and a happy Streets Week from a person who rides his bike to work every day, even though there is no dedicated, separated bike lane in Manhattan between 2nd Avenue and 8th Avenue below 110th Street. Just saying, don't mean to sound like Gersh from Streets Blog here, but just saying, maybe you and Hank Gutman can do something about it.
You are a much more buoyant version of Gersh, but you have every right to raise concerns. Tell me again where you were saying?
There are dedicated bike lanes on 2nd Avenue north-south, obviously, and 8th Avenue north-south. None between those two avenues below 110th Street. So I'm riding on the street with the traffic. And so are plenty of others of us, plenty.
All right. You make a passionate case, and we continue to expand and do new things, so I'll be talking to the team. All right, you get your 2 questions now.
Thanks for that. Okay, on to the questions. First, regarding the boulevards, what are the prospects for making it permanent? And if so, how soon do you hope that happens? I know on my bike, actually, the Amsterdam Avenue stretch is usually closed off on weekends. What are the prospects for making this permanent, and how soon?
So let me put it in the context of everything we've done. I'll start, and I'm going to turn to Jimmy Kim, who's the Chief Strategy Officer at the Department of Transportation, to add. James, look, what we're doing here is taking something that will be permanent, open streets, and something else that will be permanent, open restaurants, and we're taking a bigger approach with the open boulevards and creating these focal points where people can go on for multiple blocks and really experience the joy of this. I think it's just going to be a wonderful, festive atmosphere. So the tools will be in place because both open streets and open restaurants as approaches will be permanent. I think, as with many things, we want to try it for a while and see how it goes and decide if we want to formalize it more. But we have the legal tools we need with those two actions as they are finalized to continue this approach. Jimmy, you want to speak to that?
Yes, and James, thank you for your comments on the protected bike lane gap in Manhattan. I will immediately raise that to the team after this call. But on open boulevards, as the mayor has said, we are excited that we can, start this program immediately. And it's really based on the success of the partners and the businesses and, really the concerted efforts and enthusiasm of the residents and folks who live around there. So really, I think the goal is, if this is a huge success, and I have a strong feeling that it will be this summer, I don't see why we couldn't, contemplate rolling it out on a permanent basis. So much of the sort of, COVID-related experiments that we did last year, and huge credit to the mayor for that, have really evolved and have gained traction and popularity. And so I'm really excited to, see how open boulevards, how it rolls out this summer, and potentially see where it goes from there.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, James.
And thank you, Ms. Kim, for the attention regarding the protected bike lanes as well. My second question is from my colleague, Nicole Johnson, regarding an attack this morning on an MTA employee. And it's the latest in a series of subway attacks. Can you respond to that, please, Mayor? And do you feel that we're seeing an increase generally? And what message is that sending to New Yorkers and to people who are coming in as tourists from out of town?
James, look, any attack on an MTA worker is unacceptable. We have a lot of police in the subways. They have proven that, God forbid, anyone commits an act of violence, they will be found, they will be prosecuted, they will suffer the consequences. We're going to keep a strong presence in the subways. We're going to do all the things we need to do to bring the city back, and I really think there's a direct interconnection now. The more people come back to the subways, the safer they will get. Remember, pre-pandemic, literally, there was about one index crime per million riders each day. We can get back to that, but we need to bring the city back. So this is a case where public safety and economic recovery, all the pieces go together. And certainly from what we're seeing from the economy, what we're seeing about jobs coming back, activity coming back, I am very hopeful that's going to help us turn the corner in every sense.
The next is Marcia from WCBS.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor. How are you doing today?
Good, Marcia. How you doing?
I'm okay, thank you. So my first question has to do with the homeless. Coming out of the pandemic, the safety of all citizens has become even more complicated. It's now dangerous for both the homeless and for other New Yorkers dealing with the people on the street who are mentally ill. Yet your point person, Steve Banks, is completely unavailable to ask about the situation. I'm wondering why he's not at these news conferences or willing to do interviews with journalists to explore solutions. We've asked repeatedly and have gotten radio silence. Will you make him available to us?
Yeah, Marcia, I'm sorry to hear that. We will make available the whole range of people who can speak to this issue, including certainly Steve. it's important that we show all of the tools that are being used right now. Marcia, I remember you were with us the day we announced the Journey Home approach. And those outreach workers who go out in the subways, go out in the streets, who bring the homeless in, have done extraordinary work, even in the midst of the pandemic. I really honor these young men and women who have been out there putting their heart and soul into getting homeless folks to come in, accept shelter, get mental health services, get substance misuse services, turn their lives around, never go back to the streets or the subways. So you're going to see a lot of that as we move forward. And we want to tell that story because it's actually been quite exceptional what has been achieved. Go ahead, Marcia.
So my second question has to do with the increased use of bikes and your increased bike lanes, which is very popular with a lot of people, and I'm sure with all New Yorkers as well as tourists who can rent city bikes. But one of the things that CBS2 crews have noticed in the last, since the weather got better, is the fact that there are a lot of people who maybe don't know the rules of the road. They're driving up the wrong streets the wrong way. They go through red lights. They put themselves in dangerous situations where they could be killed or injured because they don't know what they're doing. I wonder what your solution is. Would you consider, for example, putting license plates on bicycles so that police officers would have a better chance of giving people violations if they're not doing the right thing? Because a lot of this is really dangerous and it's an accident waiting to happen, so to speak.
Yeah, Marcia, you've raised this before, and you and I think, have seen eye to eye on this one. I do think we need to do a lot of things to improve safety for everyone. It is great that more and more people are biking. It is great for our health. It is great for our environment. It's great for fighting climate change. It's great for reducing congestion on the roads. We are expanding bike lanes constantly, especially protected bike lanes. So this is the foundation, give people positive, safe spaces to bike. But we've got to do a better job at educating everyone to their responsibilities, at having the right kind of enforcement when there's a problem. I think ideas like license plates certainly need to be considered because we're going into a new world. We're going into a new world where more and more people are biking, and that's great. But in some ways, we have to catch up with that reality. So I think that's the kind of idea that now needs to be explored.
The next is Michael Gartland from the Daily News.
Michael?
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
There you go, Michael. Come on. We didn't hear you there. How you doing?
Can you hear me all right? Sorry. A couple of questions. First one on, administering vaccines to the younger segment, the 12 to 15. Does the city have any plans, to kind of separate from what it's already doing to kind of calm people's fears about vaccines? I mean, having kids vaccinated is a little bit of a different proposition for parents. Does the city have anything else in store to kind of calm parents who might be afraid that, that there are things that they need to be afraid about? I mean, do you have anything, I guess, else kind of in the hopper for that?
Well, let me turn to Dr. Katz in a moment, Dr. Choksi in a moment, and Dr. Katz, you can join in as well. But Michael, I would say this as a parent. I think the vast, vast majority of parents, their number one thought throughout each day is the safety and well-being of their kids. And the fact is that parents have had to worry about this disease and its impact. And that means seeing the evidence that vaccination has radically reduced this disease will mean a lot to parents. They're seeing evidence before their very eyes of what an impact vaccination has made for all of us. And it's a way to keep their kids safe. I also think most people believe in vaccination. I think there's been people who haven't gotten vaccinated because it wasn't convenient to them or whatever else, but not any opposition to it. Most people believe in it. Some people have questions they need answered. That's why pediatricians are so crucial. But I think what we're going to see is that the clear majority of parents will want their kids vaccinated. and we'll be there to help them when they're ready. Dr. Choksi, you want to add?
Thanks, Mr. May. I'll just add briefly to what you've already outlined. The starting point here is, of course, empathy. As parents, as doctors, understanding, of course, that you want to be absolutely sure when it comes to the safety of your own child. And so that's why our approach has to revolve, as it always has, on the science, the evidence base for the vaccines, both in terms of safety, but also making sure that we communicate about how the benefits significantly outweigh the risks, which they do in this case. And so that communication will occur along a number of different dimensions, but I'll just pull out two. One is, yes, we do plan to have dedicated efforts through our public service campaigns, through working with media to reach both young people themselves as well as parents who, of course, have to be involved in this decision. And the second dimension is what the mayor has mentioned, which is enlisting pediatricians. The American Academy of Pediatrics, community pediatricians, so many people have gotten behind the vaccination effort, and we have to rely on that because we know that parents and kids trust pediatricians. So it's about equipping them with the information that they need, as well as the vaccine, to have those conversations and actually to get kids vaccinated.
Thank you. Dr. Katz, you want to add?
I would just add as a parent that the days that my 17 and 19-year-old got vaccinated, I was so happy. I felt such a sense of relief, and I felt bad for my friends whose kids were below the age of 16, that they had to wait to experience that joy of knowing that your child is protected. Health and Hospitals is ready, sir, to with our pediatricians to vaccinate all of the kids who come to Health and Hospitals and give them that vaccination and the parents that sense of protection. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Go ahead, Michael.
The second question I had has to do with what's going on now between Israel and the Palestinians. Andrew Yang got into a little bit of hot water, voicing, kind of full-throated support for Israel in this conflict. And I was wondering, if you could weigh in on what your thoughts are on it, and also, how elected officials, politicians, people running for office, what they say can kind of get blown up in kind of such short, in such kind of a quick manner.
Well, that's a huge question, Michael. Let me speak to the very painful situation we're seeing play out in the Middle East right now. But, I think the bigger point you're raising, my simple sort of boiled down is that anyone who's speaking about issues this complex and difficult should speak from the heart and ideally speak from some experience and not do it, as a throwaway line or for expediency, but really think about the meaning here. I have been numerous times to Israel, and one of my trips went to the town of Sderot, which is very close to Gaza and has suffered rocket attacks. And I remember very vividly going to a childcare center. And it was this big, beautiful space for kids to play in, except for one thing. It was made of highly reinforced concrete because parents had to worry that while their children were in the middle of playing, a rocket could rain down on them. And it was so painful as a parent to see that. So what's 100% clear is that the targeting of civilians is despicable and unacceptable. But we also have to get to the common humanity here. If you spend time talking to Israelis, talking to Palestinians, there and here, you've got to recognize the humanity on both sides of this conflict. Children are dying on both sides of this conflict. It's absolutely unacceptable. It needs to end. There needs to be a ceasefire. There needs to be a different approach. I'm someone who believes in a two-state solution. I think the absence of that two-state solution is simply holding back the possibility of peace. But what's clear is people are suffering on both sides. This status quo is broken. And the underlying conflict in the last few weeks just has to, there has to be either a compromise or a willingness to just stop before more tensions and pain occur. That's my feeling about it.
The next is Juliet from 1010 Wins.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Mayor. I have a question about your open boulevards. I'm very familiar with Ditmars Boulevard there, the area between 33rd and 36th. And this is a highly commercial area with two-way traffic. So if you're closing those streets, what happens to the traffic that will go along or the delivery trucks? Because the side streets there are primarily residential. So would there be a plan to divert traffic in a certain way? Otherwise, you're just going to have backup around that whole area.
Yeah, Julia, it's a really fair question. I'm going to turn to Jimmy Kim, again, as the Chief Strategy Officer at DOT in just a second. But this is a really great question because it points out that whatever you do, there's going to be impact on either side of the equation. But Juliet, here's what I'd say. We're in a really extraordinary moment, coming out of such pain, but moving aggressively to recovery. We've got to do things that fuel recovery. We've got to do things that bring back the life and vitality in New York City. And we found in the crisis new opportunities with the open streets and the open restaurants. And now combining them into sort of these super open streets, these boulevards, really offers us an opportunity to bring back lots of jobs, to give people a lot of hope, to bring back tourism. I think there's a lot of pluses here. But your question's fair. How do you compensate then and make sure that things work? So Jimmy, you do strategy for a living. Help us understand how you strike that balance.
Yeah, Juliet, that's a great question. And, you know, the way we identified these open boulevards were at locations that were already operating, that already demonstrated success, that had the commitment of the commercial businesses, the restaurants, the partners who are operating the facility, the street. And I think this is really sort of an underlying tension, the competition for the streets. But on Ditmars in particular, we do have a plan. Vehicles can use parallel routes. They can use 21st Avenue. They can use 23rd Avenues. All the cross streets will remain open. And, you know, all of the improvements or you know, the reason why the open boulevards and all the open streets are temporary is that we're trying them out. And I think that, you know, based on how, you know, everything, how balances out and hopefully it will be a raring success and folks will get used to driving around these streets. I think at the end, we're going to see a net benefit for the community and the businesses.
Thank you very much, Jimmy. Go ahead, Juliet.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I just see that as a quality of life issue for the people who live around there and, you know, what happens when their streets are jammed up if there's
Juliet,
no good direction.
I want to note before your second question, I want to note that this is why, to Jimmy's previous point, previous question, you know, we really think this is going to work and be extraordinary value add. But again, we try it. We try it, we see how it goes, and then we can build upon it or we can make adjustments. So that's the beauty of this approach. But go ahead, Juliet.
Okay, thank you. So my second question regarding transit system. I had spoken with Transit Chief Kathleen O'Reilly the other day about the problem with what she calls prolific repeat offenders in the subway. She told me of a case of a suspect who's been arrested 13 times in the past year for stealing phones. There was another person arrested 65 times, most of those arrests in the subway for pickpocketing. and she and others are advocating banning repeat offenders from the system. So I was wondering what your thoughts are on that and how could that work?
Yeah, first of all, I think Chief Kathy O'Reilly is doing a great job. She's been aggressive and creative in surging officers into the subways to address specific challenges, really strong example of precision policing and more to come. And I agree with her. If someone has committed repeat offenses in the subways, they don't belong in the subways. That's another form of consequence. You know what? If you do that to your fellow New Yorkers, there has to be a penalty. And I think that's a very fair approach.
The next is Dave Evans from WABC.
Hey, Mayor, I wanted to just back up for a second about the, I think there have been 4 attacks this morning on the subway. There were 2 at 42nd and 7th, one an MTA worker, and then a person who was just sitting there got slashed in the face. I started taking the subway probably 6 weeks, maybe 2 months ago. And for many of us, it is a scary, scary situation on the subways. And you said things will get better as more people get on the subway. Is it incumbent upon us to make the subway safer?
Dave, this is the work of the NYPD every day. We have thousands of officers in the subways. We added another 600 some weeks ago. We're keeping them there. We'll make additional adjustments as we need to. We have a huge amount of outreach effort being done to get folks in who, God forbid, if they have a mental health challenge. We have crisis teams that can intervene quickly. But I really do believe that it's not about who's it incumbent upon. It's just about truth. It's just about reality. As the life of the city comes back, these issues do in many ways get addressed because we know it from what we saw for years and years and years. Crime went down and down and down in the subway. The subways, again, before the pandemic, 1 index crime per million riders. We will get back there again. It's just as simple as that. We will bring back the life of the city, all the life of the city, and we will use the NYPD wisely, and that will turn this situation around. Won't happen overnight because we're coming out of a massive, massive disruption, but it will happen. Oh, go ahead, Dave.
My other question, completely different topic about what you talked about at the beginning with the vaccines becoming available for 12 to 15-year-olds. Maybe this is just clarification, but I seem to remember seeing on the news yesterday that a lot of places around the country started doing this already, and then the CDC is supposed to vote this afternoon. I don't know if somebody jumped the gun and started doing it in other parts of the country or what, but can you clarify what's going on and the CDC, what exactly they need to do before you all can start tomorrow?
Yeah, so I guess there's some surplus enthusiasm out there in some parts of the country. I mean, look, it really is a great thing. I'll turn to Dr. Choksi, but it really is a great thing, Dave. Hundreds of thousands of young people can now be protected. And it is part of this miraculous effort with the vaccines. Really, we should stop and just recognize that, you know, a year ago at this time, everything we were going through and the question of would there ever be a vaccine, and the fact that the vaccine actually arrived before 2020 was over was a miracle. And now that we're able to give it to young people is extraordinarily positive and helpful. So in terms of the next immediate steps, Dr. Choksi.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And yes, it's a chance to offer the clarification. What happened on Monday, the FDA essentially paved the way by expanding the emergency use authorization. But as we've seen, throughout the last few months, that's only the first step. It then goes to the CDC, particularly the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices, which issues a recommendation about whether or not to use the vaccine clinically. Which then goes to the CDC director for formal sign-off. That's the part of the process that we expect to happen later today, and it's an important one from the perspective of ensuring the safety and effectiveness of the vaccine. It's an open discussion, open to the public as well as to healthcare professionals for people to ensure that we have full transparency with respect to the data and the science. But I think what you've seen is that there is a huge amount of enthusiasm, particularly among parents, to get their kids vaccinated. And so we'll be ready as a city, starting tomorrow, and we do expect that many people will bring their kids in to get vaccinated soon.
Thank you very much. Go ahead.
The next is Yoav from the city.
Hi, Mr. Mayor. I wanted to ask you about the latest federal monitors report on Rikers Island. It seems to leave very little room to argue that things aren't moving in the right, that things aren't moving in the right direction. Can you comment on the findings? What's your assessment of what's happening there?
Yeah, Yoav, I've seen a summary, and I think as we have seen with this monitor throughout, the monitor is very clear, and I'm going to push you back a little bit here, my friend. He's very clear about the improvements that have been made and the things that are being done to reform against a backdrop that was really, really broken. When we received the Department of Corrections 8 years ago, it was extraordinarily broken. We have proceeded to activate a plan to get off of Rikers once and for all. We're ending solitary confinement entirely. We've made a huge number of reforms and changes, cameras all over, much better accountability mechanisms. And the monitor says all that. And the monitor also says there's a lot of things that need to be improved and changes that have to be made, which we see a lot of truth in, and we're making those changes. It's a very, very tough dynamic, especially because on top of everything else, we went through COVID, and that required even more challenges to be addressed in our correction system. But I think this monitor has always struck a fair balance, and we take the recommendations to heart, and we're acting on them. Go ahead, Yoav.
Well, the report did use the term disorder and chaos to describe a bit of what's going on. It said the department had failed to properly manage how staffers are deployed, criticize their response to crisis situations. As you said, it's been 8 years. I understand why you would focus on the positive aspects, but why can't you equally speak transparently about what's going wrong and what's, I guess, who's to blame for the failures that have continued over these 8 years?
Yoav, again, real respect, you're doing your job, but I just really see the world differently than the way you frame the question. It's a very difficult situation. Correction is difficult to begin with. A broken system we inherited, then a pandemic, and yet profound changes and reforms have happened. Is it enough? No, we've got more to do. And that's why I said, the monitor's there, we're working with the monitor. The monitor has proposed specific changes that were put into place. For example, I've been critical about some of the approaches with staffing. We are bringing in additional officers to address that. But we also know the staffing challenges were created by COVID in large measure, where we have to spread officers out. We needed more facilities when we've been trying to actually reduce the number of facilities. Now that situation is finally changing. Court systems are back up and running. People are being sent out of our correction system to state prison. That's reducing population. We're being able to get to smaller spaces. We need less officers for that. A lot needs to be done. But I do appreciate the real changes that have been made, and I appreciate that we take these criticisms from the monitor and we're acting on them.
We have time for 2 more for today. The next is Gersh from Streets Blog.
Well, how's everybody doing today?
I am doing fine. Everyone's doing fine. But Gersh, how many exclamation points should be in Streets Week today? What is your personal view?
As an old tabloid reporter, Mayor, I never do more than 1. 2 is ridiculous. 3 is acceptable, but I always do 1. I like your exclamation marks. And in fact, I wanted to talk to you about that because it is day 3 of Streets Week with the exclamation mark, and I have been using it. And you just said something in response to a fair question from Marsha Kramer that is so anathema to safe cycling that I have to follow up. And you know it. Cyclists are already subject to the same rules as drivers in terms of speed limits and red light tickets. Many cyclists get the exact same summonses as drivers, despite the incredibly lower safety risk of a cyclist. You go through a red light on a bike, you're getting a $190 ticket too. So, as you know, requiring bike riders to register human-powered devices will greatly reduce cycling and therefore reduce the well-documented safety in numbers effect, which is an effect you benefited yourself yesterday on the 2nd Avenue bike lane. So what, pray tell, are you talking about when you say we should consider license plates for bikes?
Dear friend, what, pray tell, am I talking about? I'm talking about what I regard as common sense. That as more and more people use bikes, I think it's the kind of thing we should look at, because I don't accept that simple orthodoxy of things that might help create more safety are anathema to people embracing biking and expanded bike use. I think there is a school of thought that says that. I just don't accept that school of thought. I don't think it's proven or even provable. I think we need to combine more and more use of bikes, more and more use of mass transit, but also think about what are the factors that will increase safety in a very crowded city. So I think it's worth looking at. Go ahead, Ugers.
I was actually going to ask a totally different question, but I got to follow up because you're going with your common sense, gut reaction, which is fine. But research shows, we've discussed this, but research shows there is a safety in numbers effect. On the 2nd Avenue bike lane, for example, one of the problems there is actually too little room for cyclists, which as a result creates some of the dangers that Marcia's fair question was raising. So instead of putting license plates on bikes, which, as you know, cyclists are subject to the same tickets that drivers are subject to and receive them, as you know, why not create, as you are doing, create more safe routes for cyclists? And then you would see, as research shows, a drop in the kind of behavior that Marcia's talking about.
I don't think it's one thing or another. I mean, again, Gersh, I really appreciate the energy of all your questions, but I also think they come in with a worldview, and I'm going to challenge the worldview. I think you have to do all the above. I think we have to continue to expand bike lanes. We have to continue to educate cyclists. We have to continue to have the right kind of enforcement, and we need more and more emphasis on safety. And I don't think they are discordant. I think it's an evolutionary dynamic. I think one area where you and I would warmly agree is that cycling is being more and more a part of the future. But as it becomes more and more a part of the future, we have to think in, I think, a deeper way about safety. So I think we need to examine the things we have not yet done and not dismiss them. I oppose orthodoxy, and there's been some orthodoxy around, we can't even talk about things like license plates. I think we should talk about them. I don't think there's any danger in examining them. But I also fundamentally believe more and better bike lanes is crucial to the future.
Last question for today. It goes to Steve Burns from WCBS 880.
Hey, good morning, Mr. Mayor. How are you?
Good, Steve. How you been?
I am all right. I wanted to follow up on some of Yoav's questions about Rikers and the report. I know you've detailed kind of your worldview on this, but I just wanted to bring another number to your attention here that back in May 2016, there were 390 uses of force per month. December 2020, there were 648. So just using that metric as a very basic fundamental look at how things are going on Rikers, things have gotten markedly worse in the past 5 years. So, how can we, adequately say there have been improvements when you see that fundamental metric there, uses of force, getting so much worse over that time?
Steve, again, we've got a lot of different moving parts when it comes to correction, and it's an area that isn't for most of us our expertise, but we do our best to come up with the right policies. It gets sort of sporadic coverage in the media. I don't know if we're having even the right conversation about everything it takes to make the correction system work. I do know the basic reforms we put in place. Get off Rikers Island once and for all. It's an 80 or 90-year-old facility. Its time has come and gone. Rikers itself is inhibiting reform and change and humanity. Get off of Rikers, go to humane, modern, borough-based jails. We're doing that. And punitive segregation, solitary confinement, we're doing that. Continue to reform the way we staff. We're doing that. When we were in the midst of COVID, in this case, it was 1,600 inmates out to protect them and to protect everyone else. We did that. This is what I think proves you can make change in such a complex, challenging environment. But I hear you. When I hear a number like that, it's unacceptable. It means we've got a lot better to do But I would also note that that last number you gave included the COVID year, when everything became harder to address, when everyone was dealing with intense challenges and emotions, and staffing was down because people were out sick. There were a lot of special challenges in 2020 that need to be regarded. I am convinced we can turn the situation around because we've made major reforms and they've been working, but we've definitely got a lot more to go. Go ahead, Steve.
All right, thank you. And on the subject of law enforcement in general, at the city council hearing yesterday, the NYPD's budget, it became kind of clear that your police commissioner just has different views on some fundamental law enforcement topics than you do. I mean, you've hailed the drop in the prison population in the city as a good thing. He sees it as possibly contributing to a rise in crime. He's cited bail reform as something that's contributed to a rise in crime, yet still there's been no proven correlation to that, and I know you likely feel differently. As well as the MTA issue. He repeated some of the MTA's lines about people needing to feel safe. So I don't need you to respond to each of those individually, but just in general, it seems like this police commissioner has very different views on fundamental law enforcement topics from you. And given that he's your appointee, how do you kind of square that?
I appreciate the question. I think it's a very thoughtful question, the way you've laid it out, Steve. But I would put it in the context of 8 years. I've known the commissioner since the very beginning as mayor. He was deeply involved in the creation of neighborhood policing, which has been the central strategy that we've used, obviously working with CompStat and precision policing. That to me is where we've had extremely high levels of alignment, that we believe we've got to do a lot to keep binding police and community together. I'm not going to go point by point over everything you'd say. I would actually say in a number of areas, if you look at what I've said and he said, you'll find some real similarities. But yes, sometimes there are some differences of opinion, but that's not shocking, obviously. What does matter going forward is we are doubling down on neighborhood policing. We are doubling down on bringing police and community back into alignment after the disruption last year, and we know it can be done, and we're seeing it happening. The commissioner is very focused on young people. If you remember the state of the city right before the pandemic, we talked about his initiative to focus on young people and reorient the NYPD to constructive, positive relationships, helping young people, helping them avoid at-risk activity. That's where so much of his heart is. So I think we've got a lot of the game plan we need. There's more to do, but we got a lot of the game plan we need. And really it's about turning things around and bringing the city back. And again, I said it before and I'll conclude with this. We went through a global pandemic. We went through a disruption. There's literally no parallel in the history of New York City for the disruption we went through. There was no time previously in our history where so much of life as we knew it ground to a halt, and so much disruption occurred and so much dysfunction occurred as a result. But now we see things coming back to life rapidly. And as the city comes back to life, it's going to play a crucial role in helping us address and reduce crime. And Steve, I'll tell you something. I know what works because I saw it with my own eyes. For 6 straight years, same New York City, 6 straight years, heavy emphasis on neighborhood policing and precision policing made us the safest big city in America. Global pandemic disrupted that. We're now putting the pieces back together quickly, energetically. And that's the way forward. And it's absolutely crucial to our recovery to be safe, but our recovery will fuel our safety as well. The two will go hand in hand. And that's where I see us going in the